Now, in the last day or so, we've had 3 rather interesting news stories drop, all of which pertain to the future of the Star Wars franchise and who or what is or isn't going to be a part of it, and lead me to the conclusion that Disney and or Lucasfilm are still struggling to figure out what to do with this franchise and what people to put their trust in to tell these stories. And though I'll get to all 3 of them in turn and my thoughts on each, let's start with the one that I think most people would consider the good or best news out of the bunch, which is that there is a report or rumor that Ewan McGregor is going to be returning to the role of Obi-Wan Kenobi in a new Disney Plus series, and that this could be officially announced as soon as D23, the large Disney-only convention that's taking place next weekend. Though as great as that news is, it's far from the first time we've heard this. In fact, I'm starting to feel like the boy who cried wolf, because there's been 2 or 3 other times in the past few years now where this was reported to be all but a done deal, that we were going to get either an Obi-Wan standalone film or a series, and then nothing more comes of it. Nothing is ever officially announced. What's different this time? Well, maybe nothing. Or maybe this really will be a big announcement made at D23 next weekend. Which then could mean it'll be a hell of a weekend coming up for Star Wars, because we'll almost certainly get a new trailer, or the first officially released trailer for The Mandalorian, which is set to debut the same day Disney Plus becomes available on November 12th of this year. There's also a good chance we'll get a new trailer for The Rise of Skywalker, because it's about time to get that hype train in motion for this movie, with the general public at least, and to give fans who are maybe on the fence about seeing it more reason to potentially get excited about it. But getting back to the Kenobi series, I think this is a no-brainer for them, and I'm surprised it's taken this long to get the ball rolling on this kind of project, though supposedly it was in the works that a Kenobi film was in some phase of pre-production before all future anthology films just got scrapped, which also included a Boba Fett movie that was also planned or in the works. Anyway, again, this is something Disney and Lucasfilm need to make happen. There's almost universal agreement in the fanbase that Obi-Wan, played by McGregor in the prequels, was fantastic. One of the best parts of those films, many would argue. This is something almost all fans would get excited about and get behind. Even those less than pleased with Disney Star Wars right now might be intrigued by this one. And Ewan McGregor has said time and time again that he's willing to do it. So, again, I'm surprised it's taken this long, assuming it is actually happening this time. And yes, I know some people will say that a guy living alone in the desert is a boring show, that you really can't do all that much with Kenobi in this time period, that he's supposed to be on Tatooine, watching and protecting Luke, and he shouldn't leave the planet for any reason. And I do agree with that. I do think Kenobi should stay on Tatooine, though that doesn't mean the show has to stay on Tatooine. Because, as I've suggested before, a good portion of this series could be about the hunt for Kenobi. It could include Darth Vader, who is still obsessed with finding his old master, and hires a bounty hunter like Boba Fett to track him down. And maybe at one point, Fett disintegrates someone that he thought was Kenobi, or that could have led him directly to Kenobi, thus giving a whole new meaning to that famous line in The Empire Strikes Back, when Vader says, "I want them alive," to the group of bounty hunters, but then looks at Fett and says, "No disintegrations." Though something tells me that if Fett had disintegrated Kenobi, or someone he thought was Kenobi, or could have led him to him, that Boba Fett wouldn't still be alive during the events of The Empire Strikes Back. Or perhaps something else you could do with the show is, again, have it be partly about Vader and his Inquisitors tracking down the last remaining Jedi and looking for Kenobi. And at one point they encounter Quinlan Vos, who they then capture. Vader then turns him back to the dark side, and for those who don't know, in the canon book Dark Disciple, Vos does temporarily fall to the dark side. Anyway, Vader then sends Vos after Kenobi, and Vos eventually finds him on Tatooine, maybe using his psychometry ability to follow a trail of breadcrumbs to him. And this then puts Kenobi in a difficult situation of trying to either save Vos from the dark side and risk Vader potentially discovering Luke, or just doing what he must do and killing Vos. Anyway, that's just one example of something you could do with the show besides just having it all about Kenobi living alone in the desert. And yeah, I'd no doubt still watch that show and probably enjoy it, but it wouldn't be all that appealing to those outside of the core fandom. Because, let's be honest, if you're going to call something Star Wars, it should have some level of action and adventure in it. Either way, Ewan McGregor returning to play Obi-Wan Kenobi is going to sell a lot of subscriptions to their streaming service. It's also going to make a lot of fans very happy. So again, this is a no-brainer that will, at some point, almost certainly get announced by Disney, and maybe even next weekend. Okay, so next up here we have Rian Johnson talking again about his trilogy, saying how exciting it's going to be to work on something away from the legacy characters and to essentially decide what the future of the Star Wars franchise looks like without them. And as I've said before, I'm going to be really surprised if Rian Johnson ever does get to do his trilogy, simply because of how much controversy there is, and forever will be, around him and The Last Jedi. There are a lot of fans out there who not only won't go to see another Rian Johnson Star Wars film, but will very actively boycott it. And what I mean by that is, for better or worse, you will have people who attack these films and Johnson long before they ever hit theaters, trying to convince people that they shouldn't be made and that they shouldn't go see them when they finally come out. You will also have a lot of negative press around all of this. And yeah, I know the old saying that all press is good press, which basically means anytime people are talking about you or what you're trying to sell or promote, it's free publicity, even if they're talking negatively about it. But I really don't think Disney and Lucasfilm again want to go through the whole thing where the media berates part of the Star Wars fan base for being toxic trolls, while Disney and Lucasfilm are then forced to sit on their hands and say and do nothing, because any type of defense of those fans would have been seen as them condoning the supposed hatred towards women, even though a vast majority of the dislike for The Last Jedi is just not liking the movie itself and or the use of characters, new and old. And it has absolutely nothing to do with the gender of any of those characters. And no, I'm not trying to say I excuse or condone the action or inaction and silence from Disney and Lucasfilm, only that I understand it was a no-win scenario for them. Because if they had made some sort of official public statement saying that they believed most of the criticism of The Last Jedi was coming from fans simply expressing their views or opinions on a movie, and it had nothing to do with hate towards any group of people, the media would have ripped them apart. That's just the world we live in today. Yet at the same time, making such a statement would have earned them so much respect from the fans who were being needlessly attacked for not liking a movie and expressing their opinion. So basically what I'm saying here is I can't believe Disney and Lucasfilm would risk opening a wound or poking at it again, since it hasn't exactly closed or healed, by letting Rian Johnson do more Star Wars films. Their best approach at this point is to just let it be with The Last Jedi, and just let everything and everyone attached to it be in the past. Let those who love it, and let those who hate it, just hate it. Either way, just leave it alone, and let's move on. However, there is actually another issue with the Rian Johnson trilogy, which ties into the third and final story I want to touch on. Just when would it be made and released? Because we've been told next up is the trilogy being created by Benioff and Weiss, the showrunners from Game of Thrones. So when would Johnson's trilogy even be hitting theaters? Because I highly doubt you want to have two trilogies running at the same time. But wait, I have to rephrase all that, because Benioff and Weiss are just the guys who are going to apparently be drawing up or doing an outline for the new Star Wars trilogy, not totally making it, and maybe they'll be writing one of the films. Because it's being reported that these two, in the past couple days here, have signed a deal with Netflix to produce multiple shows for them, a deal that is apparently seeing them get paid somewhere in the neighborhood of $250 million. And it's just a guess here, but their deal with Lucasfilm likely isn't worth anywhere near in the same ballpark as that. In fact, if I had to make another guess, one of the reasons Benioff and Weiss took Star Wars in the first place was in the hopes of someday getting a big deal like they just got with Netflix. That Star Wars was a stepping stone for them, when they no longer need, it seems, which is why their roles on the next trilogy are being scaled back, apparently. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if to some degree, Netflix bought out their contracts with Disney and Lucasfilm. And to be frank with you, and Lucasfilm should consider this if it's a possibility, but I'd rather just see them go entirely and not work at all on this new Star Wars trilogy. Game of Thrones Season 8 suffered from the fact that these two were no doubt already looking to the future. And even though HBO wanted the show to go on for a few more seasons, and even George R.R. Martin, the writer of the books, thought the show should go on for a few more seasons, Benioff and Weiss said no deal, and wrapped everything up in one final 6-episode season that many feel was not the best. And so if their hearts aren't into Star Wars and the story they're about to help create, if they're only doing it because they're contractually obligated to do so, or if they're going to be distracted by all that money Netflix just threw at them, then just let them go. I don't want them to half-ass Star Wars the same way they half-assed Game of Thrones. And all this whole fiasco with these guys says to me is that Disney and Lucasfilm still just don't get it. They still don't know who should be running the franchise or directing the future of these stories. With Benioff and Weiss, they went chasing after the big names, and clearly not after people who wanted to be working on Star Wars above all else. And as I've said so many times before, what they need to do is find a person or persons who truly can and want to make Star Wars their life's work. They need a Kevin Feige type in there, someone that can do for Star Wars what he's done for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Someone who comes in there and takes the whole damn franchise by the reins and directs it to the promised land. And what you don't need is people who see it as a stepping stone, or as their personal playground to try things they want to see and don't care what the fans say or want, who have the audacity to say it's not about the fans like Rian Johnson did, when, if not for those fans, you don't have a multi-billion-dollar franchise. You have a collection of worthless stories and ideas. And that's what Star Wars is becoming under Disney, just a collection of stories that lack any sort of focus or theme anymore. There's no one in there working for Lucasfilm that has a vision for Star Wars, just visions or dreams of what it can do for them. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think about any of this or all of this. Are you excited about a possible Obi-Wan Kenobi series on Disney+? Do you think Rian Johnson will or should ever write or direct another Star Wars film? And what do you think about Benioff and Weiss at this point? Should Disney just cut their losses with them and try to find someone who actually wants to work on Star Wars? Whatever it is, let me know what you think in the comments below, and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.